While we're on Rock, as you mentioned, Rockaway, um, I guess the most appropriate thing. It's raining. They opened the beaches today. You represented Rockaway. Did you go down to Rockaway after Sandy at all? Did you see the
Yeah,
pictures?
yeah. I spent a lot of time down there, just volunteering, helping out. I have to say, if I don't know if I'm. There's really only been two times since I left Congress that I really felt a sense of real regret that I missed it. And one of them was when Sandy hit. My district. You think of if you take a look at the map of where Sandy did its most damage in southern Brooklyn and Manhattan Beach and Sheepshead Bay and Mill Basin, and then in Rockaway and Broad Channel. This is my entire. This is like it's basically a whistle tour of my district. So spent some time down there, did what I could, but I really felt I wish I would have been able to do more. And it's going to be great to get back and talk about some of the issues that they face.
If you become the next mayor, I mean, there's been a lot of discussion in the last 7 months about how to prevent something like what happened to Rockaway and Broad Channel. I was on Cross Bay Boulevard as it was flooding that night. It was honestly the scariest thing
Yeah.
ever, and it was flooding because there was nothing to protect the channel. If you're the next mayor, what have you looked at any steps to protect these communities?
Yeah.
I mean, these seaside, people have been there for 100 years, their families.
Yeah, well, for one thing, I mean, this isn't the kind of I told you so I wanted to tell, but I think it was in 2006 I put out a report about how elements of my district were endangered. I have Barbara get you a copy of it if you want to stroll down memory lane. But one of the things that I talked about was that the notion of jetties and groins are not only just to protect the sand, which is what we had been talking a lot about. If with you when you take
Beach
sand,
erosion,
yeah, you would take sand and put it in then Neponset, Bell Harbor, and Rockaway Park, and you can come back and visit it in a couple of years at Breezy Point because that's just the natural. And so there was a lot of conversation about whether this was a smart thing to do. But also the thing about jetties is they are protecting. The Rockaways are essentially a populated barrier island. Is really what it is, and it provides a barrier for Broad Channel. It provides a barrier for the other side, even in Brooklyn, and so for the longest time, I tried to get the Army Corps of Engineers to expand their vision of what they were doing every few years, not just dumping sand, but think about how you get it to stay there. But the other thing that I worked very hard on, and frankly we had some great success, was rebuilding the marshlands of Jamaica Bay. The marshes are this remarkable ecosystem that, first of all, at the base of the marshes you have these little clams, little shellfish that provide the food for the birds, but also they stop the tidal in and out that really jeopardizes Broad Channel. Now, Broad Channel has always been. I mean, there have been, there were days where they're just on a rainy day like yesterday. You would have the base, the two sides of the bays meeting. So it's always been a place that has been endangered. But I think that we really haven't taken seriously the idea that now we have wastewater treatment plants that are at 110, 120% of capacity. So on days that it rains, basically all it's doing is just flooding water back into these communities that are coming from elsewhere in addition. So they're dealing with ocean tides, they're dealing with the bay tides, and they're dealing with the inflow coming from the pollution plants. One thing I can say for sure is that we cannot just say, okay, that's the way it is, and treat. It's not a beach community. The challenge we always had in Congress was people would see these images on TV all around the country and say, this is ridiculous. Why do those people live there? Or why do you need to have those communities there at all? Rockaway is a middle class commuter neighborhood, no different than Bay Ridge, and it is not a viable option to say, okay, we just won't have people live there anymore. But I tell you something else we learned. The way to get in and out in a case of an emergency is wafer thin. I mean, if you're relying on those low-lying stanchions on the A train to evacuate people,
Scary, isn't
it
it?
is very scary. And we just by the grace of God, and some people, frankly, were holed up in their homes for weeks after
Yeah.
that. And we learned one other final lesson, and it goes further down in Rockaway than you were asking me about. We basically forgot about the people in the public housing projects. I mean, you had senior citizens on 6, 7, 8, 9, 10th floors, and I went and, frankly, when I went down and volunteered, just in these dark hallways, folks who already are not in great shape or even worse off. It was a horrible situation, and another sign that, frankly, I mean, I was there was some elements of the city that responded remarkably well. I have no idea how the sanitation department did what they did. It was like miraculous. I mean, so you'd leave one morning, and I mean, I had the blessing of having being able to leave, go home, and shower off, and come back the next day. But you know, they would, you would watch those piles grow in the Reese Park parking lot, and say, wow, someone is really doing their job. But all that being said, there are some risks that come with living near the water, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't do everything we can to mitigate them.